Hey, folks, welcome to, I can't even say welcome in again to, because this is the first one we're doing. It's the Bleacher Nation Cubs Podcast. I am Brett Taylor here with Michael Cerami. We are doing a podcast here, and it is nice to be back on the mic talking with folks. And I want to say right up top, huge thanks to Ankin Law. They are the presenting sponsor for the BN Cubs Podcast, which we could not do without them. So big thanks. If you've got legal needs, Howard Ankin, he's your guy. And we'll talk more about them later on. But welcome, folks. And spring training is underway for the Cubs, kicking off sort of that line of demarcation, closing off the offseason. Felt like a good time to start this baby. And we'll do a little bit of chatting about the offseason and what it means for the Cubs, what our expectations are. Not too big picture because we've only got, 25 minutes, but we did want to start by talking a bit about the offseason and then kind of transitioning into the spring and the season ahead. How you feeling, Mike? How you doing?
I just realized I was like smiling ear to ear. I'm even more thankful to Ankin Law than probably the company is, because I've been trying to get Brett to do a podcast with me for 10 years. Today's actually, we were just talking about it, the 10-year anniversary of Luis and me at Bleacher Nation. And Ankin Law for this year, when they re-upped, they were like, we want you guys to do a podcast. And I was like, oh, I get to force Brett to do a podcast with me now. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, just one more time, I'm just going to say thank you. They've been for over 25 years. Ankin Law has helped thousands of clients in Chicago and across Illinois. So visit ankinlaw.com or call 312-6million. It's injury law made personal. Got to do that stuff. Got to give them their props because they made this happen. And now we get to talk Cubs baseball together. Officially, we do that all the time.
Officially, that's true. That's the thing is Michael and I talk on the phone quite regularly, and we end up in conversations that, of course, if I were to step back later, I'd be like, that could have just been a podcast right there. Yeah. So hopefully that's the kind of thing we'll be bringing to you folks weekly. And let's start off, I guess, let's wrap the offseason a bit. I think what's interesting for me about the way this Cubs offseason played out, or about the way the offseasons play out in general, is because you necessarily come into them with certain hopes or expectations, or both. Sometimes there's a synchronicity between the two. And then it plays out over 4 to 5 months. You almost need a moment like this to stop and to look at the whole thing and say, oh, here's what I actually think about the whole thing. Because as you're going, you have all these micro moments where you're like, well, shit, they didn't get that guy. They didn't get that guy. This is so frustrating, whatever. And there are moments of frustration for this offseason, I will say. But biggest picture, widest lens, I think we have to say that was a successful offseason for the Cubs. I mean, there were a lot of necessary boxes checked. It might not have been the perfect version of an offseason, but this is I think, pretty significantly improved team from last year. And although that's not always the benchmark for evaluating an offseason, it was for this club, coming off back-to-back 83-win seasons, disappointing in different ways, with a group that can win, particularly in this division. They needed to have a certain kind of offseason, and I think they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look around the diamond at who's starting, I was thinking about this when we sort of set up this topic as our first one for discussion, is that I sort of put all of the Cubs players in these buckets mentally without realizing it. Like guys that the Cubs front office is right to count on, guys that they're justifiable to count on, and then the sort of what's going to happen here pieces. And like when you look at Seiya Suzuki, Kyle Tucker, Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, Nico Hoerner, you more or less know what you're going to get from those guys, and they are all winning caliber players. So it's like, okay, you are right and fine to have those players be locked in. Let's say just position players. When I look at PCA and Michael Busch as sort of that next category, and that they've already been introduced, PCA will provide his value kind of regardless of how he hits. It'll be his offensive production, in other words, is gravy, but defense and base running. And then Michael Busch is older. He has a full year under his belt. His defense improved. Like, I'm fine banking on those guys, even if it's a slight more, of a risk. The question spots then are pretty clear to me. And is Matt Shaw going to be good at third? I mean, you could believe in him all you want long-term, but it's like, That's sort of a position that they left up to chance. And then catcher, they definitely made huge improvements, but I don't think you can look at Amaya and Carson Kelly and go like, this is definitely a World Series caliber catching situation. Every team has one or two of those spots, but those are the two for the Cubs.
Except for the Dodgers.
Except for the Dodgers. And then the only other real thing is, because I do like what they did in the bullpen, is they just didn't really add to the top of the rotation. And I kind of just kept expecting that to happen, even as it became less likely. I think I just kept holding on to hope that they'd get someone from the Mariners or Dylan Cease from the Padres. And that just never came to. So I don't know. Do you feel like they left something on the table? I agree that it was a good offseason, but did they leave something on the table?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the area that I had in mind as I was setting that up. And I think because we got so distracted by the Alex Bregman stuff, which isn't to say he wouldn't have been an impactful player on this team. He certainly would have. I'm fine with Justin Turner signing. I don't necessarily conceive of it as, that's their one-to-one fallback, because Bregman would have been starting at third base. It would have been direct implications for Matt Shaw. That's not the case with Justin Turner. But when you think about the rotation and you think about the way the offseason, sort of the trajectory of it, when they signed Matthew Boyd early on, it felt like, oh, great. Love that signing, because that gives them an interesting upsidey, but middle rotation arm that kind of covers them, so that then they can be patient and deliberate and maybe take a bigger swing on a front of the rotation type arm. Of course, now we know they were probably thinking all along that wasn't how they were conceiving of it, because they were not in on the biggest free agent names as far as starting pitching. I think they hoped that they had an outside chance at Roki Sasaki. Of course, we all now know.
Yeah, everyone did, right?
Yeah, no team actually had a chance at him other than one. And then when they signed Colin Ray, to me, while he was not being signed explicitly, like, oh yeah, that's the other starter added, it was clear to me from the moment he was signed and they paid him $5 million on a limited budget. Oh, they're not adding another significant starting pitcher. And not because Colin Ray is that, but because they're not going to spend $5 million on a swing guy if they're also going to spend 25, 30 million on another. And so that part of the offseason was disappointing. I think there are risks there that don't exist perhaps in some of the other areas. The depth of starting pitching, this sort of, and this is true in the bullpen too, the volume of usable arms that they have, very high. Look around baseball. That isn't just sort of like, well, at least they have depth. No, look around baseball. The Cubs have significantly more big league caliber usable starting and relieving depth than most teams, most competitive teams. But they're just so heavily relying on like Shota Imanaga to do what he did last year, Justin Steele to do what he did, both to stay healthy, Tyone to keep outperforming peripherals, and so on and so forth. And that's the area of concern.
Yeah. I mean, I will say on the optimistic take that I have for it is that I do like Colin Ray, Jordan Wicks, and Javier Assad are sort of more established, like can contribute at the big league level. And maybe the ceiling isn't as high, but there's a floor. And then you have Ben Brown and Cade Horton are sort of more of those lottery ticket, like they might be really good. And I don't know, do you think that the Cubs, reluctance to go after one of those, Max Fried was like a extremely hot rumor coming into the offseason. Like everyone was like Max Fried in the Cubs, Max Fried in the Cubs. I don't know if you remember that. That was like the rumor to start the year. Then it disappeared. Is there any hope that it was because they were like, listen, we actually really do believe in Ben Brown and Cade Horton? Okay, I'm trying to be optimistic, Brad. It's the first time.
I forgot. It's like this is going to be video and audio, right? So like, I'm sorry, I'm making faces at you that I'm not used to. That no one can see that. Some people might see that. I think it was about the deal Fried signed with the Yankees, which was significantly larger than anyone was expecting, and was significantly larger than anything this front office was ever going to give a 30-plus-year-old starting pitcher. I mean, John Lester was the ceiling of a deal that they're going to offer to that type of pitcher, and it's a bit of a unique situation because the system was completely bereft of starting
Yeah.
pitching at that time.
And
Whereas
they knew
now
him.
you're, oh, right. And
You
you're
know what I
not
mean? I feel
wrong.
like that was
You're
a
not
close
wrong.
thing.
Yeah. You're not wrong that there are, like, I don't mean to be dismissive of Cade Horton and Ben Brown and even Brandon Birdsell when he's healthy. Like that's not what I'm saying. It's only that I think they believe in established big league pitching, this group, Craig Counsell as well. And if you could have that in place with a competitive team, you're always going to opt for that and just hang on your depth as being your depth. And so I don't think it was they might sell it that way, but I don't think it was a matter of believing in what you have. And so like, let's not block these guys. It was just, I think it's just a straight up financial decision.
Well, let me ask you this then. I've been wanting to get like I know your general feelings on this, but I want you to put it on, tape so that you can't ever go back on it. I have a pretty hard time squaring two messages / actions that the Cubs take. And it's on the one hand, they go out and get Craig Counsell 2 years ago, and we all think they're geared up for you don't get Craig Counsell unless you're going to do X, Y, Z. And then they kind of didn't do X, Y, Z. Or you don't go trade for 1 year of Kyle Tucker and then not do the big giant offseason after that. And through their actions, the Cubs didn't have the big giant offseason. It was a good offseason, I agree, but it wasn't like what they could have done. Some other team would have paired a trade of Kyle Tucker with a signing of Max Fried or Corbin Burns or whatever. That would have been their like going for it moment. The Cubs didn't do that. So through their actions, they're demonstrating that they don't necessarily believe you need to or are not capable of doing that. But at the same time, they talk about, both Carter Hawkins and Jed Hoyer has done this offseason, where they're like, well, now, the marginal value of an additional win when you're projected to win 87, 88 games is really important. So every additional win we can squeeze out actually does matter. And that's why we are. And it's like, so do you believe that? Or are you stopping short of what you are seemingly setting yourself up to do? And that's where I have trouble. I'm not even trying to, go at them for this, even though I think they deserve that a little bit. It's just, how do you have it both ways? I mean, do you have any take on that?
I started thinking about that topic a lot, weirdly, when the Cubs traded for Vidal Brujan. And it's a bizarre reason to start thinking about this like really big picture thing that you're talking about. And the reason it started to sort of nag at the back of my head is I didn't really see what they saw in him. And the only explanation I could come up with is, well, because he's out of options, of course, right? So he's basically got to make the bench. They were basically trading for him to definitely be on what is a 4-player bench, one of which is a backup catcher. So you have very limited spots. And Brujan has never hit in the big leagues. He's had 4 chances, never hit. And I'm like, well, he can cover a lot of spots. He runs the bases well. He's kind of a Miles Mastrobuoni replacement, but he doesn't make any money. And I started thinking about what else the Cubs didn't do with their bench until Justin Turner, which came, of course, only after not signing Alex Bregman. And I'm looking at that some more and I'm thinking, this is a soft spot for a team that's like trying to compete in 2020. It's that same thing you were talking about, that like, okay, a team going and getting Kyle Tucker with no designs on extending him. They'll try to sign him in free agency, but it's clear, and it was from day one, that they weren't trading for this guy so that they could make him a $400 million offer and try to keep him off the market. And so a lot of these things started coming together in my mind. And this was before the Colin Ray signing, and sort of that crystallized it for me, that the only harmonizing explanation I can come up with for the behavior of the front office is that they have a more limited budget this year than they did even last year. And I sort of don't care what anybody says, because the behavior tells me what I need to know. And they were trying to create the most competitive 2025 team possible within those budgetary restrictions. And so it is sort of it is really going for it. It is understanding that marginal wins have so much value for this team right now. It's just, we don't have any more money. I mean, you could hear it. Let me underscore that, because for me, the real confirmation came when Jed Hoyer was discussing the failed Alex Bregman pursuit. If you listen to his comments, watch what he's saying. I mean, it is very clear. I mean, he effectively said he was having to write memos constantly to convince ownership to make this special expenditure and outlay, which, by the way, would have taken them like to the luxury tax, which was, I was told that's where they were going to be like every year. And so if you're having to plead your case to be able to bring in a guy to get to that level, then that means your expected budgetary level is not anywhere close to that. And that does pretty much explain, that's the only harmonizing factor I can come up with.
Yeah, I hated that. I hated
hated
that interview and also loved it. I've been a long time complainer of Jed Hoyer interviews because he is very talented at saying nothing on purpose. Unlike there's other people in the league or in other sports, like, I don't know, Jim Boylan comes to mind in the Bulls, where you're like, you would listen to him talk and you're like, what did you even just say? Jed Hoyer was like, it's like, you didn't say anything, but I know that that's why he was doing it. That interview that you're talking about at spring training was like, oh, he's putting the cards on the table right now. And dude, I think everyone was rightfully,
it's like by that. 6 minutes. Yeah. The whole thing, the video Marquis put out a video, 6 minutes. Okay. He said more in those 6 minutes in terms of candor and the financial situation stuff than he has in 4 years at the helm.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it also, frankly, I mean, in a way it one of the only, one of the biggest silver linings or saving graces of the Ricketts family or Tom Ricketts even in particular as owners is that we always say, hey, they stay out of baseball operations, but in a backwards way, this felt like they were very directly involved in the baseball operations conversation. If Jed Hoyer said this team needed Alex Bregman, why did it take multiple memos to accomplish that? If the payroll was going to where the level, that Ricketts said it would be at the Cubs convention, which is the first tier of the luxury tax. I know that eliminated his space or flexibility to move pieces around at the trade deadline and add budget then. But if that was Jed Hoyer's budget,
right, was his decision,
then it should be his decision. So that definitely indicates that was not their budget. And so that wasn't really necessarily true. So yeah, that was brutal.
So that's kind of a wrap on the offseason, I think. It's interesting. It's the way the offseason felt like it wrapped for everybody. And it's like the way our conversation on it is wrapping, which sucks a little bit because going back to the beginning, I do think it was a successful offseason. I do think this is an improved team. I do think this is a team that is as likely to win 90 games as 82. I think that's, if I was trying to, put that, 80th percentile outcomes, they would be somewhere between like 82 and 90 wins. I think that's likely where they're going to be. And I want to be excited about that because this is a team that can win. And so I'm eager and hopeful that the games being played, spring training games now, with the Tokyo series coming up in now, 2.5 weeks, that we'll get into that mode where it's just like, this is the team. Actually, this team is pretty good. Actually, there's a lot of upside here. All true. Like you don't have to be a homer to believe that stuff. And so let's touch on, we won't always have newsy stuff for you folks because it's, like we're not going to hit up the news from like 5 days ago unless it provides for good discourse. But I do think it's useful for us to discuss today. We're recording this on Thursday, February 27th. And we've just found out Matt Shaw is going to be starting games again soon after his oblique injury. So you could at least conceive of a path for him to be back for the Tokyo series, to be starting at third base for the Cubs. Nico Hoerner, by contrast, after having flexor tendon surgery in the fall, and he's still on the rehab for that, is reportedly not going to be making the trip to Japan. And so that'll play with the roster at the margins, maybe make an additional bench space available for the Cubs to kind of buy them 2 more weeks on those decisions. But it does stink that they're not going to have Nico available for those 2 games, possibly not have Shaw available either. And
I hope they have Shaw available. I just wrote in the article that I was like, this probably gives them enough time to ramp up for Tokyo. Might have to
Michael, Mr. Optimistic there. No, it's possible. I think the hesitation on my part is only he's a prospect. He hasn't debuted. Mm-hmm. It's a big stage. If he's not I can envision scenarios where he gets into games and they're like, you know what? We feel like he needs to see more live pitching. Let's not send him out there to face like the best pitchers in the world pitching in Japan.
That's true. Wait, let me ask you this then though. Let me interrupt you because I haven't figured out how to do a podcast yet. If Shaw is available for Tokyo, who is starting at third and second? Are you doing Justin Turner at third and Shaw at second, or just letting Shaw start at third and do like John Birdie or Bruhan or someone?
Well, I don't even know if Turner would be starting at third. Anyway.
Yeah. Right.
We'll see. I was mid writing about Turner and third base when this news dropped, so it's kind of threw that for a loop. No, I mean, I think Shaw hasn't done any work at second base this spring that we've seen. It's been all about getting him really, really comfortable at third, and I think we forget that he actually hasn't spent a lot of time at second base in his collegiate and professional career. We assume he can do it, shorter throw, the sort of trajectories are a little different than shortstop, but the athleticism is the same. And he, of course, has played a ton of shortstop. So if he's not doing work there at second base to get comfortable and to sort of develop that harmony with Dansby Swanson on turns and sort of, you just want some reps. If that's not happening, then it's not going to be him anyway. And so I think probably we're looking at John Birdie or Bruhan covering at second base just for those 2 games. And you hope that that's enough time for Nico to be good to go. We knew that this window, even going back to when we first learned about the surgery, you started doing the math on the weeks and it's like, oof, the season starting 10 days early for the Cubs is going to be a potential problem. And so I'm not shocked by that news, even if it's disappointing. Hopefully it's enough time and he doesn't have to miss much more thereafter.
Yeah, I think Bruce said that opening day in Arizona is the target for now. And I can tell you with certainty that at the outset of the offseason, when we first heard about it, and I was asking around behind the scenes, the word on the street at the time was that he might miss the first week or 2 of the season after Tokyo. So this is already slightly better than what was originally projected. So at least I'm taking some solace in that. And honestly, hate to say it, but those 2 games against the Dodgers are not super winnable games as is. So,
yeah, I take your meaning there. Okay. So let's transition into something that we're going to do at the end of every podcast, different versions, different enterprises, but it's something fun we'll do. Before we transition, I want to mention again, big thanks to Ankin Law. As I'm sitting here talking to Michael, doing this, it feels nice to be back on the mic. And I do appreciate that it was not essentially, it was Ankin Law and their sponsorship that kind of pushed us to do this. And so I'm very appreciative of that. So yeah, end of podcast game. It's going to be a game, different versions. We're going to, give us a little leeway, my friends, because we're going to need to figure this out a little bit. But the idea is sometimes it'll be a surprise for that one of us is bringing to the other, and whatever, you'll get a feel for it as we do it. For example, spring training is here, right? And we're thinking about a team that's good, competitive. The Dexter Fowler video was circulating again with him returning in 2016. So I had that spring on the mind this week, and I thought it would be funny to ask Michael. Now this time he got a little bit of a heads up from me. I didn't want to totally, because I knew it could be potentially very challenging. I wanted to ask him live as we record the first spring training lineup for the Cubs in 2016, not the opening day lineup, the first spring training lineup, 2016. How many names could he name from that lineup? And then there's a bonus challenge question that I'll add at the end. So we are going, you can name starting pitcher too. And so you can go through and just, I'll set the over under 3.5. I bet you could I bet you could top 3.5.
I will say that
let's see it.
You did tell me. I did not look it up. I was sitting in bed last night and I was going, just Google it. Just, you'll look way cooler if you get this right. Just do it. Don't look like a dweeb. So this might be brutal, especially, I probably could get opening day pretty close, but spring training is like, who knows? So I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation for why I'm choosing. So starting pitcher, I'm going to go with Kyle Hendricks. And here's why. I think that they wouldn't start with some of their more veteran arms. They usually let those guys like ease into the spring in the past. And I feel like he was still young and wanting to, he was established. He had a great, year prior, but this was his outset. So are we going to
let me jump in?
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah. I'm going to give you credit. You're 1 for 1.
Yes.
Technically, Hendricks did not start that game, but as we know, in a first spring training game, you often have multiple starting pitchers going. It was actually Travis Wood who started that one, but wow. Kyle Hendricks was the follow-on as a starting pitcher stretching out. We count that one. So there you go.
Cool. Or at least that's a half.
Yeah.
Okay. Going around so for catcher, I mean, really it's got to be Montero, Ross, Contreras, or someone I forgot that was even on the roster. Same logic. I'm going to go with the younger guy. I'm going to say they had Wilson Contreras behind the plate.
It was Miggy. It was Miguel Montero.
Okay. So that's fine. Let's go around the diamond.
I didn't realize, by the way, this is already impressive. I didn't realize you were going to go like position by. I just thought you were going to be like, well, how about this guy? How about this guy? You're already impressing me a little bit by trying to go.
I don't know. I don't know what else way to do it. So first base, I don't remember who else it would be. Anthony Rizzo.
It was.
Okay, nice. Second base. So people forget, a lot of times I feel like we think of 2016, it was like Russell and Baez, but Ben Zobrist played a lot of second. Again, he was a veteran. Did they want to start him in the first game? I'm going to say that Javi Baez was at second base.
See, this is why I'm going to circle back, but I'm going to say you are wrong-ish about that. Tommy La Stella was at second base.
That makes sense. Okay, shortstop.
So keep going.
Addison Russell.
No, but that was what I would have said. This is one of those spring training ones. You remember Munenori Kawasaki?
Oh my God.
Yeah. He got the start there at shortstop.
Wow. I hope
loved watching that guy
very dearly. The Cubs have a player as fun as him, like a mascot type player. I mean, I loved him. Okay. Third base, 2016. I mean, it's like, well, why wouldn't I like, how can I not say Chris Bryant? It's Chris Bryant.
And you'd be correct.
Okay.
This lineup really did feature a lot of I was surprised when I pulled it up. I was expecting more. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In left field, instead of saying Kyle Schwarber, I'm going to say it was, did Chris Coughlin come back yet? I'm going to say Chris Coughlin was in left field, but was he not even on the roster at that point?
Should have said Schwarber. I don't know if he was back yet.
I don't know because I know he came back later, right? Okay. Center field, Fowler came back, so I'm going to say Dexter Fowler, but maybe someone else was.
Put a pin in that one.
Okay, because I was wondering, maybe they were trying Jason Hayward out in center because he played some center.
Hold that thought on center field,
that's
and
interesting.
keep moving.
And then right field, I'm going to just say Jason Hayward. It was his first spring, get him in action right away. Joe Madden liked ripping the Band-Aid off. Was it Jason Hayward?
Yeah, good guess, but no, he went with Jorge Soler. So it was like the
that
guy.
makes sense too. Right.
DH is a fun one. You're not going to, give it a go. Try to remember who was he was a rowdy boy on that, in that era. Pretty much DH only.
But not Soler.
Wound up in a famous trade. He wound up in a famous trade that summer that
Dan Vogelbach
helped the Cubs win the. It was. Nice. There you go.
Recently,
all right. So
became a coach, right, or something.
Oh, you got me. If you saw, I didn't see.
I might have made that up.
Okay. So here's the fun thing. Did you notice who we didn't name a spot for? I said he was in the lineup, but we haven't said.
No. What
started with him at second base?
Oh, what was the deal?
Javi started in center field that day. Do you remember that very brief? And you know why this is especially funny? And I wanted to hit you with this at the end. So I remembered that and looking at the lineup, I'm like, oh yeah, I wonder what we said about that at the time. And you, who had just joined BN a week earlier, you were the one who wrote the article titled Javi Baez playing center field today. Lots of optimism for ability. So yeah, I read it. You wrote a whole article on how it was exciting that Javi and his athleticism were getting a look in center field that day. And
I mean, because that was the era of too many shortstops, too many everything. And we were like, who knows where we're going to need this guy.
Yep. It's so funny. And it just reminds me. So by the way, thanks for 10 great years. I thought it was a nice, callback to that, but it reminds me of how many times someone will send me something that I wrote, 10 years ago. And I'm like, I have zero recollection whatsoever of this. So I thought that was a funny one. So there you go. There's the game. There's, kind of how it's going to work. But we will play with that a bit. Michael might drop something on me next week as a surprise. We might hopefully establish a bit of a rhythm so that you folks can kind of play along mentally and enjoy it with us. So there you go. Final thoughts. Do you want to offer up one more thanks?
Yeah, I'll say one more thanks again to our sponsor, Ankin Law, not only for making this podcast able to happen, but also like last year, I mean, we dipped our toes into some live events where we got to watch Cubs games together. We're going to do more of that this year, and that's entirely because of them. The sports media landscape is not an easy industry, and they are supporting us and helping us continue to do what we like to do, and stuff like this is part of that. So thanks again to Howard Ankin at Ankin Law.
All right. Well, that was it. That's number 1, BN Cubs podcast, episode 1 in the books. I think we did all right, and we'll get even better. And it's going to be a fun season to cover, hopefully. And I look forward to talking to you more, Michael. Thank you also for getting me back on the mic, because it is nice to do this. And we'll see you folks next week. Take care.